This is Sheriff Andy Taylor, star of the 1960s hit television show, The Andy Griffith Show. Andy Samuel Griffith was born June 1st, 1926 in Mount Airy, North Carolina, to Carl Lee Griffith, a carpenter by trade, and Geneva Nunn Griffith, a housewife. He was an only child and very shy as a youngster. It's said that he soon learned that he could hide his shyness by making everyone laugh. He attended Mount Airy High School, where he showed an interest in music and the arts. In 1944, after graduating from high school, Andy was offered a part in the local production of a play about the history of Roanoke Island called The Lost Colony. He continued for several years playing different parts and finally playing the lead role as Sir Walter Raleigh. In 1949, Griffith graduated from the University of North Carolina with a degree in music. In August that same year, he marries his college sweetheart, Barbara Bray Edwards. After college, Andy taught music and drama at Goldsboro High School in Goldsboro, North Carolina. While teaching school during the next 3 years, Andy writes a funny monologue about watching a football game for the first time. He named it, "What It Was Football." Now, Barbara and Andy developed a comedy act and began performing after Griffith's monologue became a hit on the radio. The next few years in 1955, he was asked to play the part of Will Stockdale, a simple-minded country boy that wanted to join the infantry. Critics stated that Andy Griffith did not play Will Stockdale, he was Will Stockdale. From his television performance, he was asked to play Will Stockdale on Broadway. In 1957, Andy Griffith made his film debut in A Face in the Crowd. It starred Lee Remick and Patricia Neal. Some say that Griffith gave his best ever performance as Lonesome Rhodes, who manipulated people and craved power. In 1958, Andy is picked again to play Stockdale, but this time in the film version of No Time for Sergeants, along with Nick Adams. During the stage performance of No Time for Sergeants, Griffith had become close friends with actor Don Knox. This friendship lasted for years until Knox's death in 2006. Andy and Don spoke by phone almost every day without fail, and people say that they thoroughly enjoyed each other's company. It was a true friendship. When Danny Thomas and Sheldon Leonard presented the idea of a television comedy show that would star a small southern town country sheriff, Andy Griffith was perfect for the part of Sheriff Andy Taylor. When Griffith's close friend, Don Knox, heard about the show, he told Andy, "If you're a sheriff, you need a deputy." Andy agreed. Knox was quickly hired as Deputy Barney Fife. Although it was unusual for the producer, writer, and star to allow a cast member, as Knox was, to have a seat at the management table, Andy insisted that Don have a say. And within weeks, Andy and Don were writing their own scenes. During the next 5 years, Don Knox would win 5 Emmys as the good-intended, goof-up deputy, Barney Fife. With a good-natured Andy Griffith setting the tone for the show, some say it was kind of like a family picnic. The show soon became a major hit. During the course of the show, Andy and his wife Barbara would adopt 2 children. First a son, Andy Griffith Jr., who later became a real estate developer in Los Angeles area, and in 1996 he would die of alcohol problems. He was 37 years old. Their second child, Dixie Nan Griffith, is shown here with her dad in 2005 when he received the Presidential Medal of Honor. The Andy Griffith Show was about a small town sheriff that was a widow with a small son while being cared for by the sheriff's Aunt Bee. To play the part of Opie, the sheriff's son, 6-year-old Rennie Howard was hard. Ronald William Howard was born in 1954 in Duncan, Oklahoma. He was the oldest of 2 boys. His younger brother Clint would also later on become an actor. They were born to Rance and Jean Howard, who were both performers. By the time producer Sheldon Leonard hired young Rennie to play Opie Taylor, Rennie had already been a serious actor, making his acting debut at the age of 18 months. Now this was in 1956 in Frontier Women, that his daddy Rance Howard also played in. Now Rennie's childhood was spent growing up mostly on the Andy Griffith Show, starting at the age of 6, making the pilot in 1959 until the show ended in 1968. Rennie was always treated with kindness, he said, and respect by the cast, especially Andy and Don. Ron Howard recalled years later, when he was 7, he said, he was having trouble with one of his lines when he suggested what he thought a kid would actually say. He said he was so proud when they accepted his suggestion. He couldn't quit smiling, and Andy asked him, "What you grinning at, youngster?" And Rennie said, "It's the first anyone has ever listened to me." Andy said, "First idea that was any damn good." Now Ron always spoke highly of the cast. When asked about Frances Bouvier, who played Aunt Bee, he said, "I don't think that she enjoyed being around children very much." Now Frances had developed the reputation of not being very sociable with the rest of the cast. And Andy Griffith once said that Frances never liked him and he didn't know why. She was nothing, he said, like Aunt Bee. She was very sophisticated. When Frances Elizabeth Bouvier was hired to play Aunt Bee, she was already an established actress. Having been brought up in New York and attending prestigious acting schools, her career started on the stage. As a trained Broadway actress, the fact that everyone accepted her as Aunt Bee shows what a great actress she really was. After leaving Broadway from Hollywood in 1950, she played in her first movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, with Michael Rennie and Patricia Neal. In 1954, she was in the television series It's a Great Life that starred Michael O'Shea and William Bishop. In 1957, she also starred with Eve Arden in The Eve Arden Show. Bouvier won an Emmy in 1967 for her portrayal of Aunt Bee. She was the only cast member who started with the show and stayed until the end in 1968, and then stayed another 2 years with the spin-off show Mayberry RFD that starred Ken Berry. In a 1970s interview, Frances said, "I played Aunt Bee for 10 years, and it's very, very difficult for an actress or an actor to create a role and be so identified that you as a person no longer exist." After living between New York and LA for most of her life, everyone was surprised when at the age of 70, Bouvier moved to Siler City, North Carolina. Her reason, she said, was that she fell in love with the state and thought it was so beautiful, the trees and everything. She bought a 17-room, 5-bath, 2-story house on West Elm Street in Siler City, sight unseen. During the first few years, she helped with charity organizations such as the Easter Seals Drive and so on. She served as grand marshals at local parades. But in the last few years, she had become a recluse. She seemed to be overwhelmed by her many fans. Busloads would stop in front of her house, walk on her lawn, and peer through the window, eventually retreating to her home and her 14 cats. Very seldom receiving visitors, and most of them were delivery people. It's been said that one time Andy, and also Ron Howard, stopped by to see if she would be willing to appear on the Mayberry reunion show. She would only talk to him through the door, and she said that she was too sick to perform. So the show used the excuse that Aunt Bee had passed on. In 1989, she was living in her bedroom, and the cats had the run of the basement. The house was in bad need of repair. Learning she had both heart disease and cancer, she called Andy Griffith a few months before her death and apologized for not cooperating more on the show. In November of 1989, Frances was taken to the Chatham Hospital in Siler City with chest pains. She was discharged from the coronary unit on December the 4th to return back home. 2 days later, on the 6th, Frances Elizabeth Bouvier died from heart disease related to cancer. Frances was never married, and she had no children. In her will, she left part of her estate to the University of North Carolina Public Broadcasting for television. It's been reported she also left a part to the Siler City Police and Fire Retirement System and several other charities. Frances Bouvier is buried in the Oakwood Cemetery in Siler City, North Carolina. Aunt Bee was 86 years old. The Andy Griffith Show debuted in 1960 and it ran until 1968. And in 1965, Andy announced to the cast that the show would be closing. He believed it had already run its course. Naturally, everybody started planning what to do next. Don Knox signed a 5-year contract with Universal to make movies. Now, after the contract was signed, Knox learned that the producers had persuaded Andy to continue the show for another 3 years. Don did make guest appearances on The Griffith Show in 1966 and 1967, winning a total of 5 Emmys for his portrayal of Barney Fife. Jesse Donald Knox was born July the 21st, 1924, in Morgantown, West Virginia. He was the youngest of 4 boys born to William Jesse and Elsie Moore Knox. Don grew up with his dad having mental problems, even to the point of pulling a knife on his youngest son. For years, Don was affected by his dad's actions. However, when he was 13, his dad passed away, and his mother Elsie took care of the family by running a boarding house in Morgantown. As a youngster, Don created a ventriloquist act with a dummy that he named Danny. He earned money wherever he could by performing at private parties and schools. After graduating from Morgantown High School in June of 1943, Don entered the military and served in the Pacific during World War II, entertaining the troops with Danny. He said he got so tired of performing with a dummy that while on board a ship, he throwed his dummy overboard. He said he swore he could hear Danny calling for help. After being discharged from the military in 1946, he enrolled at the University of West Virginia. While there, he meets and marries Catherine Metz. They will have 2 children, Karen and Thomas. Karen becomes an actress, and Thomas, electrical engineer. After college, Dunn and Catherine moved to New York, and in 1953, Dunn got his first major break when he landed a role on the soap opera Search for Tomorrow. That lasted until 1955. It was his only serious role to ever play. And in 1956, he becomes a part of the Steve Allen weekly TV variety show. He was one of the characters on the Man in the Street interviews. And at that same time, Knox was appearing on Broadway in No Time for Sergeants, where he met Andy Griffith. In 1968, he was in the movie version of the same name with Griffith. 2 years later, Dunn was hired to play Barney on the Andy Griffith Show. He was hired to play straight man, actually, for Andy, but they soon learned that it worked better the other way around. After leaving the Andy Griffith Show, Dunn and Catherine divorced after 19 years of marriage. Dunn was married 2 more times in 1974 to Laura Lee Chung-Dae. They will divorce in 1983. And in 2002, he marries Frances Yarborough. They remained married until his death in 2006. During the course of his career, Knox starred in numerous movies. In 1968, he starred in The Shakiest Gun in the West. In 1975, he starred in the Disney film The Apple Dumpling Gang with Tim Conway. In 1979, Dunn went back to television as Mr. Furley in Three's Company with John Ritter. The show ran all the way until 1984. In 1986, he teamed up again with Andy and Ron Howard in Return to Mayberry. In 1988 through 1992, Dunn played in a recurring role with his old friend Andy Griffith as the pesky neighbor in Matlock. And in 2005, Dunn began taking treatments for lung cancer. He took those treatments at the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. Now, in February of 2006, while in the hospital, he got to feeling better and was allowed to go home. He was visited by his friend Andy Griffith, who flew all the way from North Carolina to California just to visit Dunn. Within 2 days, February the 24th, 2006, Dunn Knox dies from complications of lung cancer. His wife Frances and his daughter Karen were by his side. He was buried at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. Although he was one of America's best-known personalities, for years he had suffered from severe hypochondria, also shyness and depression. Dunn Knox's star is located on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 7083 Hollywood Boulevard. Dunn Knox was 81 years old. After the Andy Griffith Show ended in 1968, Ron Howard was one of few child actors that was able to successfully transition into a teenage actor. Ron graduated from John Burroughs High School in 1972. In 1974, Ron won the role of Richie Cunningham in the TV show Happy Days. The series ran until 1984. While starring in Happy Days, Ron marries his high school girlfriend, Cheryl Alley, on June 7, 1975. In 1976, Ron played with John Wayne and Lauren Bacall in The Shootist and was nominated for a Golden Globe. Ron and Cheryl have 4 children. Bryce Dallas, born in 1981, the twins, Jocelyn and Paige, born in 1985, and Reed Cross. He was born in 1987. In 1984, Ron Howard began directing movies instead of acting in front of the camera, something that he had wanted to do ever since he was very young. In 1984, there was Splash that he directed. In 1985, Ron directed Cocoon. In 1995, he directed Apollo 13. Ron and Clint's mother passed away from heart disease on September the 2nd, 2000. She was 73 years old. And that same year, Ron directed How the Grinch Stole Christmas. In 2002, Ron Howard won the Academy Award for Best Director and Best Picture for A Beautiful Mind. Ron Howard has achieved the due respect from all his peers as one of the best actors and directors in Hollywood. And on top of all of that, Opie Taylor has grown up to be a very nice man. After the closing of the Andy Griffith Show, the cast helped support the spin-off show Mayberry RFD by performing in a few of the first episodes. In 1972, Andy Griffith and Barbara Edwards Griffiths divorced, and 3 years later, on the 18th of January, 1975, she marries Michael St. Clair. 5 years later, on July the 23rd, 1980, Barbara Griffith St. Clair dies. She's buried at the Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills, California. Barbara was 53 years old. In 1975, the same year that Barbara had married Michael Sinclair, Andy marries actress Sola Castolo. They divorced in 1981. At the time of their divorce, Andy says he'll never marry again. Never say never, because 2 years later, on the 2nd of April 1983, Andy marries Cindy Knight. Despite their age difference, he was in his 50s and she was 27. The marriage lasted for 29 years until his death. In 1986, 3 years after marrying Cindy, Andy began starring in another hit TV show, Matlock. It ran from 1986 until 1995. During Matlock, Andy would sometimes call on his old friends such as Don Knox and others from the Andy Griffith Show, and always stayed in contact with his friends. In 2000, Griffith underwent quadruple bypass surgery after suffering a heart attack. And in 2007, he underwent hip surgery after a fall, and had suffered from Guillain-Barré syndromes that paralyzed his legs. He couldn't walk for 7 months. On July the 3rd, 2012, ambulances was called to Griffin's home at Manteo home located in Roanoke Island, North Carolina. He had suffered a heart attack. Andy Samuel Griffith died at his home at the age of 86. At his request, Andy was buried in the Griffith Family Estate Cemetery on Roanoke Island within 5 hours of his death. Andy Griffith's star is on the Hollywood Walk of Fame located at 6148 Hollywood Boulevard. Andy Samuel Griffith was 86 years old.